Kashmir. It is known as the Switzerland of India.
However, there is a sad tragedy behind its beautiful landscape. Here lies the story of Kashmir, the heaven on earth. Since 1947, India and Pakistan have been locked in conflict over Kashmir, a majority Muslim region in the northernmost part of India. The mountainous territory was once a princely state. Now it is claimed by both India and Pakistan.
The roots of the conflict lie in the country's shared colonial past. From the 17th to the 20th century, Britain ruled most of the Indian subcontinent, first indirectly through the British East India Company, and then from 1858 onwards, they ruled directly through the British Crown.
Over time, Britain's power over its colony weakened, and a growing nationalist movement threatened the Crown's slipping rule. The British Empire created Pakistan on August 14, 1947, as a homeland for Indian Muslims.
There was a belief that a separate Muslim homeland would be an ultimate solution to their apprehensions and fears, even though there was fierce opposition from many people. These people included Indian nationalists as well as Muslim religious leaders. Despite multiple protests, the British had created Pakistan, but they had created it in areas where it was not demanded.
There were at least 550 princely states in colonial India that had either a choice to join Pakistan, India, or they could be independent. When the Muslims who chose Pakistan started moving there, the ones who came from the more Hindu parts of India were cut off. Basically, Pakistan had closed the border due to the opposition from the native Muslim ethnic groups.
After all this confusion, Muslims in India were divided into two new hostile countries. To make matters even more absurd, India, the Hindu country, had a bigger Muslim population than Pakistan. And even worse, Muslims couldn't interact with each other due to the fact that they live in two separate nations. Families that had been separated had no way of communication.
As talked about before, Kashmir was one of the 550 princely states. The two nations were constantly fighting over Kashmir because it was one of the biggest princely states. Also, Kashmir had a majority Muslim population, meaning that most of the Muslims would have gone to Pakistan there. However, they were governed by a Hindu Maharaja. His name was Hari Singh. Hari wanted to remain independent. The governor of Pakistan, meanwhile, constantly pressured Kashmir to join them. When no further action was taken, Pakistani rebels took over West Kashmir along with Afghanistan refugees. Since they had no military, Singh asked for India's help in staving off the invasion. But India said that in order to gain their military assistance, Kashmir would have to accede to India, thus becoming part of the new country. Singh, with no hope left, agreed and signed the Instrument of Accession, a document that aligned Kashmir with the Dominion of India in October 1947. Kashmir was later given special status within the Indian Constitution, a status which guaranteed that Kashmir would have independence over everything but communications, foreign affairs, and defense. This special status was actually very recently revoked by the Indian government in August 2019. Later, Pakistan, angered not only by the fact that the population of Kashmir couldn't choose which country they wanted to go to, but also by the fact that they lost the war, had its representatives argue that the people should be allowed to determine which nation they should join. The UN Security Council also agreed to that, and eventually they came up with resolutions in 1948 as well as 1949.
However, non-conclusive fighting still went on, and eventually this led to the UN intervening on July 18, 1949. The Karachi Agreement was born, and Pakistan and India both signed it. This agreement established a ceasefire that had to be supervised by the UN. Conflict resumed again in early 1965 when Pakistani and Indian forces clashed over disputed territory along the border between the two nations. Hostilities intensified that August when the Pakistani army attempted to take Kashmir by force. The attempt to seize the state was unsuccessful, and the Second India-Pakistan War reached a stalemate. This time, the international politics of the Cold War affected the nature of the conflict. The United States had a history of ambivalent relations with India. During the 1950s, U.S. officials regarded Indian leadership with some caution. However, a 1962 border conflict between India and China ended with a decisive Chinese victory, which motivated the United States and the United Kingdom to provide military supplies to the Indian Army. After the clash with China, India also turned to the Soviet Union for assistance, which placed some strains on U.S.-Indian relations. However, the United States also provided India with considerable development assistance throughout the 1960s and the 1970s.
U.S.-Pakistani relations had been generally positive. The U.S. government looked to Pakistan as an example of a moderate Muslim state, and they greatly appreciated Pakistan's assistance in holding the line against communist expansion. Both the United States and the United Kingdom supplied arms to Pakistan in these years. After Pakistani troops invaded Kashmir, India moved quickly to internationalize this national dispute. They asked the United Nations to once again take on the role it had in the First Indo-Pakistani War and to end the current conflict.
The Security Council passed Resolution 211 on September 20th, calling for an end to the fighting and negotiations on the settlement of the Kashmir problem. The United States and the United Kingdom supported the UN decision by cutting off all arms supplies. On December 3, 1971, Pakistan launched preemptive aerial strikes on 11 Indian Air Force stations in North India on a number of airfields, including Ambala in Haryana, Amritsar in Punjab, and Udhampur in Jammu and Kashmir. The attacks did not succeed in inflicting substantial damage. The Indian Air Force retaliated the next day and quickly achieved air superiority.
The Instrument of Surrender was signed on December 16, 1971. This agreement thus ended the Bangladesh Liberation War and the War of 1971 for the Indo-Pakistani.
The Pakistan Army took advantage of the lack of Indian troops during winters and intruded into Mushko, Dras, Kargil, Batalik, and Turtuk subsectors between Sojila and Leh. They crossed the line of control and intruded 4 to 10 kilometers into Indian territory.
On July 26, 1999, the Indian Army captured all of the Indian posts in Kargil that had been occupied by Pakistani's army. The official death toll on the Indian side was 527, while on the Pakistani side, it was between 357 and 453. The reason the death toll on the Indian side was so high compared to the Pakistani side was because the Pakistani soldiers and terrorists had positioned themselves at an altitude that was very high, and they had an advantage in combat that they could fire down at advancing Indian groups. Not only that, but Pakistan also shot down 2 Indian fighter jets, while another fighter jet crashed during operation. As for international relations, Pakistan asked the U.S. for help, but President Bill Clinton had declined to do so until Pakistani troops were withdrawn from the line of control. Many nations, especially India, are all sure that something like the Kargil War will never happen again, simply because Pakistan does not have the facilities for it.
The Kargil War was the last and most recent war between India and Pakistan. However, this does not mean that India and Pakistan are not still fighting. Kashmir is a huge topic that brews intensely between the two nations, and recently it has become a worldwide affair. Article 370 is a 70-year-old provision that had given autonomy to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. It was recently taken away from the Indian constitution by Prime Minister Mody. His goal is to completely win over Kashmir. Many Indians and Pakistanis alike have conflicted feelings about this, but no action has occurred yet. A special thanks to our friends, teachers, and parents for taking time out of their day and encouraging us to go to the best of our abilities.
We are very grateful for all of your support and gratitude through this long journey.
Thank you.